Boston, Massachusetts, May 2025. A cold drizzle blanketed the city, turning the cobblestone streets of Beacon Hill into a shimmering mosaic under the flickering streetlights. The New England Historical Museum loomed like a fortress, its granite facade and stained glass windows casting long shadows in the night. Inside, artifacts from America's colonial past, muskets, parchment letters, and weathered flags stood silent, witnesses to centuries gone by. But tonight, one relic would become the centerpiece of a chilling mystery. Inspector Daniel Harper, a lean man in his late 30s with piercing green eyes and a worn trench coat, stepped into the museum's cavernous atrium. His police badge hung loosely around his neck, swaying as he moved. Rainwater dripped from his coat onto the polished marble floor, leaving small puddles in his wake. Beside him was Dr. Sarah Coleman, a forensic scientist with the Boston Police Department. Her dark hair was pulled into a tight ponytail, and her glasses fogged slightly from the damp air. Sarah, known for her meticulous lab work, was not accustomed to being dragged into crime scenes at this hour, but Harper's urgent call had left her no choice. "Daniel, it's almost 11, Sarah said, her voice sharp as she adjusted her wool scarf. "You owe me a serious explanation for pulling me out of my warm apartment." Harper's lips curved into a half-smile, his gaze fixed on a massive glass display case at the center of the atrium. Encased within was a suit of armor from the 17th century, its iron plates polished to a dull sheen. The armor belonged to William Whitaker, a colonial officer whose name was etched into the museum's records. Intricate engravings of eagles and vines adorned the breastplate. But what drew Harper's attention was the eerie red glow emanating from the helmet's eye slits, pulsing faintly despite no visible light source. "You heard about the murder last night?" Harper asked, his voice low, cutting through the atrium's stillness. Sarah nodded, pushing her glasses up. Thomas Bradley, the museum's head curator, stabbed through the heart right here in front of this case. No witnesses, no usable camera footage. The system was down for maintenance. She paused, glancing at the armor. "And the staff are whispering that this thing moved." Harper's smile widened, a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Moved? A relic older than the Constitution? That's a story worth investigating." Before Sarah could retort, a deep, resonant bark echoed through the vast hall. Shadow, a German Shepherd K9 with the Boston PD, stood rigid before the glass case, his black fur bristling, teeth bared in a low growl. Shadow was trained to detect blood, explosives, and subtler traces beyond human perception. Tonight, he was on high alert, brought in by his handler, Officer Michael Torres, to assist the investigation. "Shadow's got a problem with that armor," Torres said, gripping the leash tightly. "He's been like this since we walked in. Never seen him so agitated." Harper crouched, locking eyes with Shadow. The dog's dark gaze was intense, almost accusatory. "What's got you so worked up, boy?" Harper murmured, then rose, approaching the case. He tapped the glass with a gloved finger, checking the lock. It was secure, no signs of tampering. But as he swept his flashlight across the marble floor, a faint smear of dried blood appeared beneath the armor's pedestal, barely visible in the dim light. "Sarah, come here," Harper called, pointing. "This blood wasn't in the initial report." Sarah knelt, pulling a sterile swab from her forensic kit. "Sloppy work by the first responders? Or is this new?" Harper didn't answer immediately. He signaled Torres to unlock the case, a privilege granted due to Harper's reputation for cracking cases that baffled others. He ran his gloved hand over the armor's cold surface, searching for wires, mechanisms, anything out of place. The iron was solid, unyielding, with no trace of modern tampering. Yet, As his fingers brushed the helmet, a chill ran through him, sharp and unnatural. Shadow's barking grew fiercer, a guttural warning that reverberated off the walls. "Daniel, you're not buying into the ghost nonsense, are you?" Sarah asked, her voice betraying a hint of unease despite her rational demeanor. Harper turned, his eyes sharp. "Ghosts don't leave blood, Sarah. People do. And someone's using this armor to play a very clever game." The museum was a labyrinth of history, its halls lined with artifacts, rusted swords, faded maps, and portraits of stern-faced colonists. Harper and Sarah spent hours combing the crime scene, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Shadow led them to a shadowed alcove near the atrium's rear, where a small scrap of colonial-style linen was caught in a floorboard crack. It smelled faintly of metal and bore traces of a white powder. Harper sealed it in an evidence bag, handing it to Sarah. "Get this to your lab," he said. "I want to know what that powder is." Sarah nodded, tucking the bag into her kit. "Could be chalk, talc, or something more exotic. I'll run a full-spectrum analysis." By now, whispers of the killer armor had spread like wildfire among the museum staff. A security guard, a burly man named Carl, swore he'd heard clanking metal in the dead of night, as if the armor were pacing the halls. Emily Whitaker, a soft-spoken archivist with pale blonde hair and a habit of avoiding eye contact, mentioned seeing the helmet's red glow flicker in the dark. The staff's fear was palpable. Their voices hushed as they recounted tales of the armor's curse. Harper dismissed the supernatural talk, but the armor's history intrigued him. Museum records detailed William Whitaker's story, a colonial officer executed for treason in 1678, a charge later proven false. The Whitaker family had owned vast lands in Massachusetts, only to be massacred in a brutal land dispute with rival settlers. The armor, recovered from a recent excavation, was a centerpiece of the museum's colonial exhibit. Was this a vengeful spirit, as the staff feared, or a calculated act of misdirection? As the night wore on, Harper examined the atrium's layout. The high ceilings and shadowed corners offered plenty of hiding spots. He noted the camera positions. None had captured the murder, allegedly due to a scheduled maintenance outage. Convenient, he thought. Too convenient. Shadow, still restless, paced near the armor's case. Harper watched the dog closely, trusting his instincts. "Torres, has Shadow ever reacted like this to an inanimate object?" Torres shook his head. "Never. He's trained to pick up on things we miss. Blood, chemicals, even stress pheromones. Something's off here." Sarah, crouched near the blood smear, looked up. "Daniel, this blood is fresh. Less than 12 hours old. It wasn't here during the initial sweep. Someone's been back." Harper's jaw tightened. Then we're dealing with someone bold enough to return to the scene. Or desperate enough. He circled the armor again, his flashlight illuminating the engravings. The eagle motifs seemed to stare back, their etched eyes glinting. He pressed his hand against the breastplate, testing its weight. It was heavy, immobile, yet the red glow in the helmet persisted, faint but undeniable. "Sarah, any theories on that glow?" he asked. She frowned, peering at the helmet. "Could be a chemical reaction. Phosphorescence, maybe. Or a hidden LED. I'll need to take a closer look in the lab." Harper nodded, but his mind was racing. The blood, the linen, the glow, all pointed to a human hand orchestrating this chaos. But why the armor? Why now? As dawn approached, the museum grew colder, the drizzle outside turning to a steady rain. Harper stood before the armor, its silhouette imposing in the half-light. Shadow sat at his side, still growling softly. A faint metallic scrape echoed from the shadows, barely audible over the rain. Harper spun, flashlight cutting through the dark, but found only empty halls. Sarah gripped his arm, her voice low. Daniel, this place is giving me the creeps." He smirked, though his eyes remained vigilant. "Don't worry, Sarah. Shadow and I will find the truth, whether it's hiding in the shadows or behind that iron mask." The investigation stretched into the early hours. Harper interviewed the night staff, noting their unease. Carl, the guard, recounted hearing footsteps in the east wing, though he'd found no one. Emily Whitaker, the archivist, hovered nervously, offering to pull records on the armor's provenance. Her quiet demeanor struck Harper as unremarkable, but he filed her name away for later. Sarah's preliminary tests on the blood smear confirmed it matched Thomas Bradley's type, but the white powder remained a mystery. "I'll need a mass spectrometer to identify it," she said. "Could be a cleaning agent, a drug, or something else entirely." Harper nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The armor was a focal point, a symbol designed to inspire fear. But symbols didn't kill, people did, and whoever was behind this had intimate knowledge of the museum, its routines, and its secrets. As they prepared to leave, Shadow paused at the atrium's entrance, sniffing the air. His ears twitched, and he let out a low whine. Harper followed his gaze to a darkened staircase leading to the basement archives. For a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of red light in the distance. "Torres, keep Shadow close," Harper said. "We're not done here yet." Boston, Massachusetts, May 2025. The morning after the grisly discovery in the New England Historical Museum, the city awoke under a leaden sky, the drizzle of the previous night replaced by a heavy fog that clung to the streets of Beacon Hill. The museum, usually a beacon of scholarly quiet, buzzed with nervous energy as police officers cordoned off the atrium and reporters clamored outside for updates on the killer armor. Inside, the air was thick with tension, the staff whispering in huddled groups, their eyes darting toward the glass case where the iron suit of William Whitaker stood, silent and imposing. Inspector Daniel Harper stood in the museum's archive room, a dimly lit chamber lined with oak shelves and glass cabinets filled with yellowed documents. His trench coat was slung over a chair, his sleeves rolled up as he pored over a leather-bound ledger from the colonial era. His green eyes scanned the faded ink, searching for clues about the armor's origins. Dr. Sarah Coleman sat at a nearby table, her forensic kit open, meticulously cataloging the scrap of linen and white powder found by Shadow the previous night. Her glasses reflected the glow of a portable spectrometer, her fingers deftly handling vials and slides. "Daniel, you've been staring at that book for an hour," Sarah said, not looking up from her work. "Find anything, or are you just enjoying the smell of old paper?" Harper's lips twitched into a half-smile. "Patience, Sarah. History doesn't reveal its secrets easily. This ledger mentions William Whitaker, the armor's owner, executed in 1678 for treason, but the charges were overturned a decade later. His family didn't fare so well." Sarah glanced up, curious. "What happened to them?" Harper flipped a page, his finger tracing a line of cramped handwriting. The Whitakers owned a large estate in what's now Essex County. In 1678, a rival family, the Hales, accused them of conspiring with local militias to seize land. The dispute turned bloody. A massacre, really. The Whitakers were nearly wiped out, their lands confiscated. William's armor was buried with their legacy, only unearthed last year during a dig sponsored by the museum. Sarah frowned, setting down a vial. "So the armor's a relic of a family feud. You think that's connected to Bradley's murder?" "Everything's connected," Harper said, closing the ledger. "The question is how, and why now?" Before Sarah could respond, a sharp bark echoed from the hallway. Shadow, the German Shepherd K9, bounded into the room, his handler, Officer Michael Torres, trailing behind. Shadow's ears were pricked, his nose twitching as he circled a stack of crates in the corner. Harper raised an eyebrow, recognizing the dog's alertness. "What's he got, Torres?" Harper asked, stepping toward Shadow. Torres shrugged, tightening the leash. "No idea, but he's been like this all morning. Kept sniffing around the armor case before we came down here." Harper knelt beside Shadow, who pawed at a crate labeled Whitaker Excavation, 2024. He pried it open, revealing a collection of rusted tools, pottery shards, and a small iron medallion engraved with an eagle, the same motif as the armor's breastplate. Shadow's nose zeroed in on the medallion, a low growl rumbling in his throat. "Interesting," Harper murmured, holding the medallion to the light. "Sarah, add this to your analysis. If Shadow's this worked up, there's something we're missing." Sarah took the medallion, her gloved hands careful. "Could be residue from the dig site. I'll check for traces matching the linen or powder." As they spoke, a commotion erupted upstairs. Harper's radio crackled, and a frantic voice broke through. "Inspector, you need to get to the East Wing. We've got another body." The East Wing of the museum was a maze of narrow corridors, lined with colonial portraits and glass cases displaying muskets and powder horns. By the time Harper, Sarah, and Torres arrived, a small crowd of officers and staff had gathered around a crumpled figure on the floor. The victim was Dr. Margaret Ellison, a historian who had overseen the Whitaker excavation. She lay face down, a dagger embedded in her back, her blood pooling on the oak floor. The armor's case was visible through an archway, its red glow faintly pulsing in the morning light. Harper crouched beside the body, his eyes scanning the scene. "Same MO as Bradley," he said. "Single stab wound, precise, no signs of a struggle. Whoever did this is fast and confident." Sarah knelt opposite him, her forensic kit already open. "The dagger's antique. Looks like a colonial-era blade. I'll need to confirm, but it's consistent with the weapon used on Bradley." Shadow, still on edge, sniffed the floor around the body, his nose leading him toward the armor's case. He stopped short, barking furiously, his hackles raised. Harper followed, his flashlight sweeping the area. A faint scratch mark marred the glass case, barely noticeable but fresh. "Torres, keep Shadow here," Harper said. "Sarah, what's the timeline on that powder analysis?" Sarah looked up from her work. "Preliminary results should be ready by noon. The linen's fibers are old, possibly from the same period as the armor. The powder's trickier, could be a mineral or chemical compound." Harper nodded, his mind racing. 2 murders in 2 days, both tied to the armor. The staff's whispers of a curse were growing louder, and he could see the fear in their eyes. Emily Whitaker, the archivist, stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching a stack of files. Her pale face was drawn, her eyes avoiding the body. "Ms. Whitaker," Harper called, approaching her. "You worked with Dr. Ellison on the Whitaker exhibit, correct?" Emily nodded, her voice barely audible. "Yes, Inspector. She was passionate about the project. I helped catalog the artifacts." "Anything unusual about the armor or the excavation?" Harper asked, watching her closely. Emily hesitated, her fingers tightening on the files. "Just the stories. The locals near the dig site said the Whitaker land was cursed. They didn't want us disturbing it." Harper filed her response away, noting her unease. "Thank you, Emily. We'll need access to those excavation records." As Emily hurried off, Sarah joined Harper, her expression grim. "The dagger's clean. No prints, no residue. This killer knows how to cover their tracks." Harper's gaze returned to the armor. "They're not covering everything. Shadow's telling us something's off, and I'm starting to think this isn't random." By midday, the museum was locked down, its halls eerily quiet except for the hum of police activity. Harper and Sarah relocated to a temporary command post in the museum's conference room, a wood-paneled space overlooking Boston's fog-shrouded skyline. Sarah's spectrometer beeped and she leaned over the results, her brow furrowed. "The white powder's a match," she said. "It's a rare mineral, kaolinite, mixed with traces of iron oxide, found primarily in Essex County, where the Whitaker estate was located. The linen's weave matches colonial-era textiles, but it's too well preserved to be 300 years old." Harper leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his chin. "So someone's using materials from the Whitaker dig to stage these murders. Why?" Before Sarah could answer, Torres burst in, Shadow at his side. "Inspector, we've got another one. Henry Caldwell, a museum donor, found dead in the courtyard. Same deal, stabbed with an antique dagger." Harper was on his feet in an instant, his coat slung over his shoulder. "Let's go." The courtyard behind the museum was a walled garden, its cobblestone paths lined with rose bushes and statues of colonial figures. Henry Caldwell's body lay near a fountain, his expensive suit stained with blood. A dagger, identical to the one that killed Ellison, protruded from his chest. Shadow circled the scene, his nose low, pausing at a patch of disturbed soil near the fountain. Harper examined the body, noting the precision of the wound. "Caldwell funded the Whitaker excavation," he said. "That's 3 victims connected to the same project." Sarah swabbed the dagger, her movements swift. "No prints again. But look at this." She pointed to a faint white powder dusting the cobblestones, matching the sample from the linen. Harper's eyes narrowed. "Our killer's leaving breadcrumbs. They want us to see the connection." Shadow's barking drew their attention to the soil. Harper knelt, digging with a gloved hand, and unearthed a small iron key, its surface etched with an eagle. "Another Whitaker relic," he said, holding it up. "This is getting personal." Back in the archive room, Harper spread out the excavation records Emily had provided. They detailed the Whitaker dig, a joint effort between the museum and a private foundation. Bradley, Ellison, and Caldwell had all been involved, either directly or through funding. The records also mentioned a local legend. The Whitakers' massacre was said to have cursed their land, with William's armor as the focal point of their vengeance. "Superstition or not," Harper said, "someone's using this legend to justify murder. But why target these 3? Sarah looked up from her spectrometer. "The kaolinite's a clue. It's specific to the Whitaker estate. Maybe the killer's tied to that land." Harper nodded, his mind piecing together the puzzle. He turned to Torres. "Take Shadow back to the armor case. I want to see what else he finds." Torres led Shadow to the atrium, where the armor stood unchanged, its red glow faint but persistent. Shadow sniffed the base of the case, then pawed at the pedestal. Harper joined them, examining the armor closely. His fingers brushed a seam on the breastplate, and with a faint click, a small panel sprang open, revealing a hidden latch. "Well, well," Harper said, his voice low. "This isn't just a relic. It's a machine." Sarah peered over his shoulder. A mechanism inside the armor? That could explain the glow, maybe a concealed light source. Harper closed the panel, his expression grim. Or a concealed weapon. Our killer's using this armor to stage their crimes, but they're not a ghost. They're someone who knows this museum inside and out. As they stepped back, Emily Whitaker appeared at the atrium's entrance, carrying a box of files. "Inspector, I found more documents on the Whitaker family," she said, her voice soft. "They might help." Harper took the box, his eyes meeting hers briefly. "Thank you, Emily. You've been very helpful." As she walked away, Shadow let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on her retreating figure. Harper frowned, filing the moment away. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was still incomplete. The armor, the murders, the Whitaker legacy, all pointed to a motive rooted in the past and a killer hiding in plain sight. Boston, Massachusetts, May 2025. The fog that had cloaked the city for days thickened, wrapping the New England Historical Museum in a ghostly veil. By midweek, the museum had become a fortress of paranoia, its doors locked to the public, its halls patrolled by police. The murders of Thomas Bradley, Margaret Ellison, and Henry Caldwell had transformed the once quiet institution into a cauldron of fear, with whispers of accursed armor spreading beyond the staff to the streets of Beacon Hill. The colonial-era suit of William Whitaker, its iron surface etched with eagles and vines, stood in its glass case, its helmet's red glow now a beacon of dread. Inspector Daniel Harper stood in the museum's security room, a cramped space filled with flickering monitors and the hum of outdated equipment. His trench coat hung on a rack, his sleeves rolled up as he reviewed grainy footage from the night of Ellison's murder. The cameras, supposedly down for maintenance during Bradley's death, had captured fragments of the East Wing before going dark again. Harper's green eyes narrowed at a fleeting shadow on the screen, too vague to identify but moving with purpose near the armor's case. Dr. Sarah Coleman sat nearby, her forensic kit spread across a table cluttered with coffee cups and notepads. Her laptop displayed the results of her latest analysis. The white powder from the linen and courtyard was kaolinite, a clay mineral laced with iron oxide, unique to the Whitaker estate in Essex County. The linen's fibers, though styled to mimic colonial textiles, were modern, suggesting a deliberate attempt to evoke the past. "Daniel, this kaolinite is specific," Sarah said, pushing her glasses up. "It's not just from the Whitaker dig. It's from a particular vein near their old manor. Whoever's leaving it knows that land intimately." Harper paused the footage, his finger tapping the screen. "And they're leaving it for us to find. Bradley, Ellison, Caldwell, all tied to the Whitaker excavation. This isn't random, it's a message." Before Sarah could respond, a sharp bark echoed from the hallway. Shadow, the German Shepherd K9, bounded into the room, his handler, Officer Michael Torres, struggling to keep up. Shadow's ears were pricked, his nose twitching as he pawed at the door leading to the museum's main stairwell. "Shadow's at it again," Torres said, catching his breath. "He was fine until we passed the West Wing. Then he went nuts." Harper crouched beside Shadow, meeting the dog's intense gaze. "Lead the way, boy." The West Wing was a quieter part of the museum, its dimly lit halls lined with dioramas of colonial life, spinning wheels, muskets, and wax figures in period dress. As Harper, Sarah, and Torres followed Shadow, the air grew colder, the fog outside pressing against the tall windows. Shadow stopped at a locked door marked "Storage Restricted." His growling intensified, his paws scratching at the base. Harper tested the handle, finding it secure. "Torres, get this open, now!" Torres radioed for a key, and within minutes, a nervous security guard, Carl, arrived, fumbling with a ring of keys. "This room's for overflow artifacts," Carl said, his voice shaky. "Nobody's been in here since the Whitaker exhibit was set up." The door creaked open, revealing a dusty chamber filled with crates, mannequins, and draped objects. In the center, illuminated by a single overhead light, stood the suit of armor, or what appeared to be it. Its iron plates gleamed, the eagle engravings unmistakable. But Harper's heart skipped a beat. The armor was supposed to be in the atrium, locked in its case. "Sarah, check the atrium," Harper said, his voice tight. "Make sure the armor's still there." Sarah hurried off, returning minutes later, her face pale. It's there, Daniel. Exactly where we left it. This is a replica. Harper approached the armor, his flashlight sweeping over it. The craftsmanship was identical, down to the smallest detail, but a faint scratch on the breastplate marked it as distinct. Shadow sniffed the base, his growling softening into a whine. Harper knelt, finding another trace of white powder, kaolinite, sprinkled on the floor. Someone's gone to a lot of trouble, Harper said, standing. A second armor, placed here to scare us, or to distract us. Sarah examined the replica, her gloved hands probing the seams. No hidden latch like the one in the atrium, but the glow's here too. Look. She pointed to the helmet, where a faint red light pulsed in the eye slits. Harper's jaw tightened. This isn't supernatural. It's staged. Someone's moving this armor, or these armors, around the museum. Torres, holding Shadow's leash, looked uneasy. Inspector, the staff are freaking out. They think the curse is real. Emily Whitaker was telling everyone this morning about some old legend. Said the Whitaker spirits haunt their relics. Harper's eyes flickered at Emily's name. The archivist had been helpful, perhaps too helpful, with her constant supply of records. What exactly did she say? Torres shrugged. Something about William Whitaker's execution. Said his family swore vengeance on anyone who disturbed their legacy. She seemed rattled, though. Kept saying we should leave the armor alone. Harper filed the information away, his mind racing. The armor's appearances, the kaolinite, the antique daggers, all pointed to a killer with a deep connection to the Whitaker family. But how were they moving a heavy suit of armor undetected? By afternoon, Harper and Sarah reconvened in the conference room. The city's fog now so thick it obscured the view of Boston Common. Sarah's analysis had confirmed the kaolinite's origin, a specific quarry on the Whitaker estate, untouched since the 17th century. The replica armor, she noted, was made of modern materials, but crafted to mimic the original, suggesting access to skilled artisans or historical expertise. The killer's leaving us clues, Harper said, pacing. Bradley oversaw the Whitaker exhibit. Ellison led the dig. Caldwell funded it. They're targeting everyone involved in bringing that armor here. Sarah nodded, typing on her laptop. And the daggers, both are replicas of a 1678 design, specific to the Whitaker militia. Whoever's doing this has studied their history. Harper stopped, his eyes narrowing. Or they're living it. The Whitakers were massacred over land. Maybe someone thinks that wrong was never righted. Their conversation was interrupted by a shout from the atrium. Harper grabbed his coat, and they rushed downstairs, Shadow and Torres close behind. A small crowd had gathered around the armor's case, where a new horror awaited. A bloodied handprint on the glass, still wet. The armor stood unchanged, its red glow pulsing brighter than ever. Sarah swabbed the handprint, her hands steady despite the staff's gasps. Human blood, she said, her voice low. I'll need to run a DNA match, but it's fresh within the hour. Harper scanned the crowd, noting Emily Whitaker at the back, her face pale, her hands clutching a notebook. Ms. Whitaker, he called, striding toward her. You were here this morning. See anything unusual? Emily flinched, her voice barely audible. I was cataloging in the archives. I heard a noise, but I didn't see anyone. Just the armor, glowing. Harper studied her, his instincts tingling. Stay close, Emily. We may need more of your expertise. As she nodded and retreated, Shadow let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on the armor. Harper followed, inspecting the case. The handprint was deliberate, placed where it couldn't be missed. He opened the case, checking the hidden latch they'd found the previous day. It was undisturbed, but a faint trace of kaolinite dusted the interior. Sarah, this is a taunt, Harper said. They're watching us, daring us to catch them. That evening, Harper and Sarah visited the Boston Public Library. seeking more on the Whitaker family. The library's reading room, with its soaring ceilings and green-shaded lamps, was a haven of quiet. Harper pored over microfilm records, while Sarah cross-referenced geological surveys of the Whitaker estate. The records confirmed the massacre. The Hales, a rival family, had orchestrated the Whitakers' downfall, seizing their land through forged documents and hired mercenaries. William Whitaker's execution was the final blow, his armor buried in a hidden vault until the 2024 dig. Sarah tapped her screen. The kaolinite quarry was on Whitaker land, sealed after the massacre. Only someone with access to the estate or its relics could get it. Harper leaned back, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The killers tying their crimes to the Whitakers' betrayal, but moving that armor, or a replica, requires strength, planning, and access. We're looking for someone inside the museum. As they left the library, the fog had lifted, revealing a starry sky. Harper's phone buzzed with a message from Torres. Shadow had found another clue near the West Wing storage, a small iron pin, etched with an eagle, hidden in a vent. Harper's pulse quickened. The pin matched the medallion and key from earlier, all Whitaker relics. Back at the museum, Harper examined the pin under a magnifying glass. This was placed deliberately, he said. They're leaving a trail, but it's too neat. They want us to follow it. Sarah frowned, her spectrometer humming. The pin has kaolinite traces, same as the others. Daniel, this killer's not just angry, they're obsessed. Shadow, resting nearby, lifted his head, his ears twitching. A faint clank echoed from the atrium, like metal on stone. Harper grabbed his flashlight, motioning for Torres to follow. They reached the armor's case, finding it untouched, but a new scratch marred the glass deeper than before. Harper's eyes hardened. They were here, Sarah, right under our noses. Shadow growled, his nose pointing toward a shadowed staircase leading to the basement. Harper hesitated, then nodded to Torres. Let's see where this leads. As they descended, the air grew colder, the glow of a distant lantern flickering in the dark. The curse, it seemed, was far from finished. Boston, Massachusetts, May 2025. The New England Historical Museum stood shrouded in an uneasy silence, its granite walls absorbing the weight of 3 murders in as many days. The fog that had blanketed Beacon Hill had lifted, leaving a crisp, moonlit night, but the chill inside the museum lingered, as if the very stones were holding their breath. The colonial-era suit of armor, once belonging to William Whitaker, stood in its glass case in the atrium, its red glow dim but persistent, a silent accusation in the dark. The staff, now reduced to a skeleton crew, moved like ghosts, their whispers of a curse growing more desperate with each passing hour. Inspector Daniel Harper stood at the base of the atrium's grand staircase, his trench coat draped over his arm, his green eyes scanning the shadows. The bloodied handprint on the armor's case, discovered the previous day, had yielded no DNA matches, a frustrating dead end. Dr. Sarah Coleman was in the museum's makeshift lab, a converted storage closet, running tests on the latest kaolinite samples, her spectrometer humming softly. The investigation was closing in on something tangible. Harper could feel it, but the killer remained a step ahead, taunting them with relics and riddles. Shadow, the German Shepherd K9, paced restlessly nearby, his handler, Officer Michael Torres, struggling to keep him calm. The dog's ears twitched, his nose low to the ground, as if drawn to an invisible trail. Harper had learned to trust Shadow's instincts. The dog had uncovered the linen, the iron key, and the pin, all tied to the Whitaker family's tragic past. Now, as Shadow whined and tugged toward the basement staircase where they'd seen the lantern's glow, Harper knew they were on the cusp of a breakthrough. "Torres, let him lead," Harper said, his voice steady but urgent. "Sarah, grab your kit. We're going downstairs." Sarah emerged from the lab, her glasses slightly askew, a flashlight in one hand and her forensic bag in the other. "Daniel, if this is another wild goose chase, I'm billing you for my sleep deprivation." Harper's half-smile flickered. "Bill me later. Shadow's onto something." The basement staircase was narrow, its stone steps worn smooth by centuries of use. The air grew colder as they descended, the scent of damp earth and old wood replacing the museum's polished sterility. Shadow's growling intensified, his paws clicking against the stone. At the bottom, a heavy iron door stood ajar, its hinges rusted but recently oiled. Harper pushed it open, revealing a cavernous chamber lit by a single flickering lantern, hung on a wall hook. The chamber was a forgotten archive, its walls lined with crumbling shelves and dust-covered crates. Cobwebs draped the corners, and the air was thick with the musty scent of decay. In the center stood a wooden table, its surface cluttered with artifacts: a rusted musket, a cracked porcelain cup, and a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed but intact. Shadow circled the table, his nose fixed on the journal, a low whine escaping his throat. Harper approached, his flashlight illuminating the journal's cover, embossed with an eagle, the Whitaker family crest. He opened it carefully, revealing dense handwriting in faded ink. The entries, dated 1678, detailed the final days of William Whitaker's life, written by his sister, Abigail. Her words were a litany of despair, recounting the Hales' betrayal, the forged documents that stripped their land, and the massacre that followed. One passage stood out. "William's armor forged for battle now lies buried with our honor. Should it see light again, let it carry our vengeance upon those who desecrate our name." Harper's pulse quickened. "This is it, Sarah. The motive. Someone's acting on this curse, using the armor to settle a 300-year-old score." Sarah, examining the artifacts, nodded. The journal's authentic, late 17th century, based on the paper and ink. But look at this. She held up a small iron tool, its tip sharp and stained with dried blood. This could be part of the murder weapon, or a prototype. Shadow, undeterred, moved to a corner of the chamber, pawing at a loose flagstone. Harper joined him, prying the stone free with a crowbar from a nearby crate. Beneath it was a hidden compartment containing a bundle of cloth wrapped around a set of iron springs and gears, etched with the same eagle motif. Harper's eyes narrowed as he recognized the components, parts of a mechanical device designed to fit inside the armor. "Sarah, this is how they're doing it," he said, holding up a spring. A concealed mechanism in the armor, likely a spring-loaded blade. The killer's using it to stage the murders, making it look like the armor itself is attacking. Sarah took the gears, her gloved hands turning them over. Ingenious. The blade could retract after each strike, leaving no trace except the wound. But it would require precise timing and access to the armor. Harper stood, his mind racing. Access. That's the key. Whoever's doing this knows the museum's layout, its blind spots, and its history. They're not just a killer, they're a planner. Back in the atrium, Harper examined the armor with renewed focus. The hidden latch they'd found in Chapter 2 was still there, and with careful probing, he triggered it again, revealing a small compartment in the breastplate. Inside was a spring-loaded blade, its edge razor-sharp, stained with traces of blood. Sarah swabbed it immediately, her expression grim. "This matches the wounds on all three victims," she said. "The blade's angle and depth are consistent. We've found the murder weapon." Harper closed the compartment, his jaw tight, but not the hand wielding it. the replica in the West Wing, the kaolinite, the journal, all point to someone obsessed with the Whitakers, and they're still here, watching us. As if on cue, a faint clank echoed from the East Wing. Shadow's head snapped up, his growl reverberating. Harper motioned for Torres to follow, and they moved swiftly, Sarah close behind. The East Wing was dark, its lights dimmed for the night. Shadow led them to a display case containing a colonial dagger, identical to those used in the murders. The case was intact, but a single kaolinite-dusted fingerprint marked the glass. Sarah swabbed the print, her hands steady. "It's partial, but I can run it through the database. Might get a hit." Harper's eyes scanned the hall, landing on a figure in the shadows. Emily Whitaker, the archivist, standing near a portrait of a colonial woman. She clutched a stack of papers, her face pale, her eyes darting nervously. "Ms. Whitaker," Harper called, approaching. "Working late again?" Emily flinched, her voice trembling. I was cross-referencing the Whitaker records. I thought they might help with the investigation." Harper studied her, noting the sweat on her brow despite the cold. "You've been very thorough. Found anything new?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on the papers. "Just more about the massacre. The Hales, they destroyed everything the Whitakers had. It's a tragedy." Harper nodded, his tone neutral. "Tragedies have a way of lingering. Stay safe, Emily. Whoever's doing this isn't finished." As Emily hurried off, Shadow let out a low growl, his gaze fixed on her retreating figure. Harper exchanged a look with Sarah, who raised an eyebrow. "She's jumpy," Sarah said. "More than usual." "She knows more than she's letting on," Harper replied. "But so does our killer." The next morning, Harper and Sarah met at the Boston PD's forensic lab, a sterile room filled with humming machines and the faint smell of chemicals. Sarah's analysis of the armor's blade confirmed the blood traces matched Bradley, Ellison, and Caldwell. The fingerprint, however, was inconclusive, too smudged for a match, but consistent with someone who handled the kaolinite. "The killer's careful," Sarah said, adjusting her glasses. "They're leaving clues but covering their tracks. The kaolinite, the relics, the blade, it's all deliberate." Harper leaned against a lab table, his mind piecing together the puzzle. The journal mentioned vengeance. The victims were all tied to the Whitaker dig, which disturbed their land. "This is personal, Sarah. Someone's settling a score for the Whitakers." Sarah nodded, pulling up a map of the Whitaker estate. The kaolinite quarry was sealed after the massacre, but the dig reopened it. If the killers connected to that land, they could be a descendant or someone who feels the Whitaker's pain. Harper's phone buzzed with a message from Torres. Shadow had found another clue in the basement chamber, a fragment of a modern keycard, partially melted, hidden in a crevice. Harper's pulse quickened. A keycard means museum access, staff, security, or someone with a duplicate. They returned to the museum, where the atmosphere was electric with fear. Carl, the security guard, reported hearing footsteps in the basement at night, though he'd found no one. Emily Whitaker was in the archives, her desk piled with books on colonial history. She glanced up as Harper entered, her eyes red-rimmed, as if she hadn't slept. "Inspector," she said, her voice soft, "I found a map of the Whitaker estate. It shows tunnels under the land. Some might connect to the museum's foundation." Harper took the map, his instincts tingling. "Tunnels? That's new. Thank you, Emily." As she nodded and returned to her work, Shadow sniffed her desk, his tail stiff. Harper noticed a faint trace of white powder on her sleeve. Kaolinite, perhaps, from handling artifacts. He filed it away, his suspicion growing, but not yet solidified. That evening, Harper, Sarah, and Torres explored the basement chamber again, guided by Emily's map. Shadow led them to a hidden panel in the wall, concealed behind a crate. Harper pried it open, revealing a narrow tunnel, its walls damp and lined with ancient bricks. The air smelled of earth and iron, and a faint red glow flickered in the distance. "Another lantern," Harper said, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "Our killer's been using these tunnels to move undetected." They followed the tunnel, Shadow's nose guiding them. It ended at a sealed door, its surface etched with the Whitaker eagle. Harper forced it open, revealing a small chamber filled with relics: a rusted sword, a tattered flag, and a wooden box containing a single letter, sealed with wax. The letter, written by Abigail Whitaker in 1678, read, "To my descendants, let our blood cry out. The Hale's treachery must be answered. Their allies struck down. The armor is our justice." Harper's blood ran cold. This is the killer's blueprint. They're following Abigail's words to the letter. Sarah examined the letter, her voice low. The victims, Bradley, Ellison, Caldwell, their families trace back to the Hale's allies. This isn't just revenge, it's a blood feud. Shadow whined, his nose pointing to a corner where a modern tool, a screwdriver, lay discarded, its handle dusted with kaolinite. Harper picked it up, his mind racing. The killer's blending old and new. Colonial relics, modern mechanisms. They're in this museum, Sarah, and they're not done. As they emerged from the tunnel, the museum's lights flickered, casting eerie shadows. Shadow growled, his gaze fixed on the staircase above. A faint clank echoed like metal on stone. Harper's hand went to his sidearm, his eyes scanning the dark. "They're here," he whispered, "and they know we're getting close." Boston, Massachusetts, May 2025. The New England Historical Museum stood under a moonless sky, its granite facade swallowed by the darkness of Beacon Hill. The murders of Thomas Bradley, Margaret Ellison, and Henry Caldwell had turned the museum into a tomb, its halls empty, save for the police and a handful of staff too frightened to leave. The colonial-era suit of armor, once belonging to William Whitaker, remained in its glass case, its red glow now a faint flicker, as if exhausted by the chaos it had inspired. But Inspector Daniel Harper knew the truth. The armor was no curse, but a tool wielded by a meticulous killer. Harper stood in the museum's atrium, his trench coat folded over a chair, his green eyes fixed on the armor. The spring-loaded blade they'd found in its breastplate, hidden behind a latch etched with the Whitaker eagle, had confirmed his suspicions. The murders were not the work of a vengeful spirit, but of someone with intimate knowledge of the museum and the Whitaker family's tragic history. Dr. Sarah Coleman was in the forensic lab, finalizing her analysis of the kaolinite traces and the bloodied handprint, her reports narrowing the killer's profile. Shadow, the German Shepherd K9, sat at Harper's side, his ears pricked, sensing the tension in the air. "We're close, boy," Harper murmured, scratching Shadow's head. "Tonight, we end this." Sarah emerged from the lab, her glasses reflecting the dim atrium lights. The handprint's a dead end, no DNA match, too smudged, but the kaolinite on the screwdriver from the tunnel matches the quarry on the Whitaker estate. Whoever's doing this has access to that land. Harper nodded, his mind racing. The journal from the hidden chamber, written by Abigail Whitaker, had laid bare the family's betrayal, the Hale's forged documents, the massacre, and the curse laid upon those who disturbed their legacy. The victims, Bradley, Ellison, Caldwell, were all linked to the 2024 excavation that unearthed the armor. The killer was targeting the descendants of the Hale's allies, using the armor's mechanism to exact revenge. And Harper had a suspect in mind, Emily Whitaker, the quiet archivist whose constant presence and knowledge of the Whitaker history were too convenient to ignore. "Sarah, we need to draw them out," Harper said, his voice low. "The killer's watching us, leaving clues to taunt us. Let's give them a stage." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "A trap? Using what?" Harper gestured to the armor. "The star of the show. We'll make them think they've got one last chance to strike." Harper's plan was simple, but risky. He instructed Officer Michael Torres to spread word among the staff that the armor was being moved to a secure vault for forensic testing, a lie designed to provoke the killer. The museum's basement, with its hidden chamber and tunnels, would be the trap setting. Harper and Sarah rigged the atrium's security cameras to loop old footage, creating the illusion of an empty museum, while they and Torres hid in the basement, Shadow at the ready. As night fell, the museum grew silent, the only sound the faint drip of water in the basement's stone walls. Harper crouched behind a crate in the hidden chamber, his sidearm holstered but within reach. Sarah was stationed near the tunnel entrance, her forensic kit replaced by a flashlight and a radio. Torres and Shadow waited in the shadows, the dog's eyes glinting in the dark. Hours passed, the tension thick. Then, a faint clank echoed from the tunnel, a metallic sound, deliberate and slow. Shadow's ears twitched, his body tensing. Harper signaled for silence, his eyes locked on the chamber's entrance. A figure emerged, cloaked in a dark hoodie, moving with practiced stealth. They carried a small tool, a screwdriver, its tip glinting, and approached a crate marked Whitaker Artifacts. Harper's pulse quickened. The figure knelt, prying open the crate, revealing a replica of the armor's breastplate. They reached inside, triggering a hidden mechanism, and a soft click echoed as a blade extended, then retracted. Harper stepped forward, his flashlight cutting through the dark. "Stop right there," he said, his voice calm but firm. The figure froze, then turned slowly. The hoodie fell back, revealing Emily Whitaker's pale face, her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and defiance. Shadow growled, his hackles raised, as Torres stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "Emily," Harper said, his tone steady. "It's over. We know about the armor, the blade, the kaolinite. You've been playing a dangerous game." Emily's lips trembled, but her voice was cold. "You don't understand, Inspector. They deserved it. All of them." Sarah emerged from the tunnel, her flashlight trained on Emily. "Desola." "Deserved what?" Harper asked, stepping closer. "Start talking, Emily. Why Bradley, Ellison, and Caldwell?" Emily's eyes burned with a quiet fury. "They desecrated my family's legacy. The Whitakers were slaughtered, betrayed by the Hales and their allies. Bradley dug up our land. Ellison wrote lies about our name. Caldwell paid for it all. They had to pay." Harper gestured to the breastplate. "And you used the armor to do it. A spring-loaded blade hidden for centuries, triggered by someone who knew exactly where to look." Emily's jaw tightened. "Abigail's journal told me everything. The armor was our justice, built to protect us and punish our enemies. I'm a Whitaker. It was my duty." Sarah handed Harper a file from her bag. "We ran the partial fingerprint from the dagger case. It's yours, Emily. And the kaolinite on your sleeve matches the quarry. You've been careful, but not careful enough." Emily's shoulders slumped, the fight draining from her. "I didn't want to hurt anyone else. Just them, the ones who profited from our pain. The armor. It was my ancestors' will." Harper holstered his weapon, his expression softening but resolute. "Your ancestors didn't want this, Emily. Revenge doesn't bring them back. It only buries you with them." Torres cuffed her, and Shadow, now calm, sat by Harper's side. As Emily was led away, the museum seemed to exhale, the armor's glow fading to nothing. The curse, it seemed, was finally broken. The next morning, Harper and Sarah sat in the police station, paperwork spread across a desk. Emily's confession had been recorded. She'd studied the Whitaker relics for years, discovering the armor's mechanism during her archival work. She'd used the tunnels to move undetected, planting kaolinite and relics to evoke the curse. The replica armor, crafted by a contact in Essex County, was her backup, a decoy to confuse the investigation. Sarah closed her laptop, her glasses fogging slightly from the steam of her coffee. "She almost had us, Daniel. If Shadow hadn't been so persistent, we might have bought the ghost story." Harper scratched Shadow's ears, a rare smile breaking through. He's the real hero, smelled the truth from a mile away. The case was closed, the museum reopened, and the armor returned to its case, now just a relic of a painful past. Boston moved on, its streets bustling under a clear spring sky. But Harper knew the city, like the Whitakers, carried its scars, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for someone to listen.